Right. Als iemand trouwens het nummer van Dimitri heeft, stuur hem even een berichtje dat hij hier over een kwartiertje of zo over naartoe moet komen. Daar hebben we wat voor.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome to this nice Sunday afternoon. My name's Kenny, also known as X-Dragon X.
My name's Ben, also known as the Holy Flame.
And today we're going to be talking about basic 3D printing and what the possibilities are, and also what our roadmap into 3D printing was like. So the way we started, the failures we met along the way, spectacular failures as well, but also very big successes. Well, in short, we're going to introduce who we are in a couple seconds, beside our names, of course. We're going to tell you what 3D printing is, before the people that don't know. We're going to tell you about the most used methods of 3D printing. We're not going to cover everything, because there's a very wide variety of 3D printing and 3D printing methods available. There's also a couple different types of 3D printers that are available. Again, we're not going to cover everything. We're going to cover the most used and commonly available ones. Then we're going to tell you about our successful projects that we've had.
And our less successful.
Which are, of course, fun, but less documented, because, well, we're going to sweep them under the rug and everything like that. And
we want to get rid of them.
And we want to talk about our future in 3D printing and how we hope to involve everyone into that.
So, my name is Ben, also known as the Holy Flame. You can find me on Thingiverse under the Holy Flame. And, well,
Welcome.
I'm a software engineer for a web shop here in Holland. And my 4 hobbies, I play a lot of music. I play bass, and you'll hear about that in this presentation. So yeah, I mainly make, as for things I like, is mainly musical based.
All right. Well, I'm Kenny, X-Dragon X. I'm also on Thingiverse. I try and share a lot of my different models with everyone, because I don't believe in actually making money on 3D printing. I just want to invent new techniques, make it helpful in everyday situations. And I do that with a couple of my hobbies. I also am a bass guitarist, but I also play the drums. I ride a motorcycle. I've got a couple parts for that. I am also an airsofter, and a lot of parts there are very expensive, so I try and recreate them myself with the same, either the same level of usefulness or even more useful for the things that are not commonly available. Yeah, that's basically who we are in short. 3D printing in general. Well, there's a lot of different 3D printing methods. How is it done? And depending on how you look at it, even this is
3D
a 3D print. Sorry, cheap word joke, had to be done. But there's a lot of different ways to 3D print. The usual way people talk about 3D printing nowadays is the heating of a plastic, or at least a plastic type material, until it's moldable enough to be ejected through a small nozzle into a 3D form. At that point, you start using your motors to actually build up layers until it's a 3D figure, which can be done in a variety of ways. Using it sideways, with extra supports. Some even have them in powders. And then you sinter the powder, you put another layer of powder on top of it, and you just keep going until at the end you pull your model out of the powder, and then you have your 3D print. There's a couple of 3D printing methods. These are the most used ones. We have stereolithography, also known as
a basic like resin basin, which with UV light gets hardened, and then gets pulled out of the basin one step at a time until like a model gets pulled out of the resin.
Yeah. And we were kind enough for the people that don't know exactly what we were talking about and like visual aids to include a little GIF of it, or GIF if some people prefer it that way. As you can see, it basically hardens a single layer by using a little LCD screen on the bottom and shining light through that, and then curing the resin in the exposed spots. Then it pulls it out, dunks it back under, and repeats it for every layer and layer on top of that. It's quite a fast process, very detailed, but the resins can be toxic, not just to breathe, but also to the skin. You need to wear gloves. It's more of an industrial type of engineering. There are some hobbyists out there that are using it in home, but it's not that safe.
Well ventilation required. Also a lot of money because the resin is pretty expensive.
And of course, there are gonna be people that disagree with us. Sure, everyone has their own experience. But just in our opinion, the SLA is not very practical. There's also the selective laser sintering, also known as SLS. Again, nice visual aids. This is what I was talking about before with the powder. There's a laser on top of it that basically sinters and melts the powder in there, and it slides a wiper over it with new powder. So every layer is a new layer of fresh powder, and then it sinters it to the layer before, which is very good. Gets you also a very high detail, but it's very expensive.
It's very rigid. It's a very tough material.
And because it's so expensive, if you want something printed with SLS, it's recommended to have a bottom in your model and make your model hollow. Because for every piece of powder you use, even if it's trapped inside your model, you'll pay a lot of money. So having a hole in the other side of your model releases all the unused powder and makes the print cheaper. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the FDM printing, the fused deposition modeling. That's the printing technique that most people use nowadays and are most familiar with. Are your, home and hobbyist type of 3D printers, which is basically heating up filament that's usually on a spool, and then precisely positioning it on a 3D print and stacking that up in layers again. With those 3D printers, there's a couple types of printers. We have the Cartesians, Core XYs, Deltas, and then you have a whole lot of other range of printers. Yeah, for example, the double delta, the helix. There's too many to mention, and there's new types coming out once every couple days, because there's so many different types.
And there's so many people in the community just trying to expand it.
Yeah. The most familiar one is the Cartesian type of printer, which uses one or more motors per axis to move one side of the printer. Let me walk over there. For example, this bed moves and it has one motor driving the bed to the front and the back. It uses two motors to lift the entire print head and has one motor to slide one axis along the way. That's one of the most used ones. For example, the Prusa is the most known one. That's why we have a picture of the Prusa i3.
Yep.
There's a lot more. You've also got Chinese clones, non-Chinese clones, homebrew prints, laser cut prints. This is the most common used printer out there right now. Lesser known, but still readily known, is a Core XY. And one of the most used models for that is the Ultimaker. How that basically works is it has a dropping bed that is actuated by one motor at the bottom, which lowers the bed with the print. And then we'll demonstrate for the people sitting over there.
There.
And there are two motors on the inside rolling some bars, which in turn, by a dual play of those motors, move the head from left to right and front to back. The head itself will not lower or raise.
So that's right there.
Yeah.
there's the motor there, and that slides this carriage over the belts.
And our most preferred printer right now is a Delta type of printer, basically consisting of a triangle which has bars rising up, which has a carriage lowering and rising along that route to actually move the nozzle towards where it wants to deposit the plastic. There's a lot of different types out there. You have got spools and motors on top, you've got them on the side, you've got them on the bottom. Well, some of them are basically just parts of scrap lying around and a big triangle frame. Could work. Everybody has their own thing. We've got a couple successful projects. We also got some prints. Got a little feedback there. That's not nice. We're going to pass those around.
You can just
Go.
Can you say something about the printing place?
Yeah, I'm working to that. Hold your horses.
Here you go. Can you just hand this?
Got enough different types of print you can throw around. Right, we've got a couple types of print that everyone is holding right now. We've got some 3D scans in peculiar my face. We've got a 3D printed lion, which has its hairs printed outright, and then you use a blow dryer to actually just comb its hairs. The one she's holding right now is a Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil Tower of Skulls. And if you inspect it closely, there's also one side which has been cleaned up, and the other side which still has the filament in there, the supports. Because the plastic is being heated at usually 200 plus degrees Celsius, just to be safe. It becomes very viscous, very liquid. And to make sure it doesn't start sagging, as soon as you print an overlapping layer which falls to the outside, it needs supporting material to make sure it doesn't sag. So that way you can inspect how that works in parts that actually lean out a lot. We also have a so-called torture egg, which are basically 3 very narrow printed parts in each other, which is sometimes quite hard because not every printer has the tolerances to actually separate those parts or fuse the parts together during the printing. For example, this is a print-in-place piece. It basically moves and is being printed in one go. Let's see, I believe it's printed somewhere halfway closed, somewhere around here, I believe.
Yeah, it's
and then like by opening up some parts that might have been fused during the printing, and by slightly rotating everything, it basically is an enclosed print with everything together, but at the same time, you actually have a moving part. No extra screws or whatever required. We also have some filament swatches, which is going around.
There's also a tiny white part, and that's, well, it is a filled print. But what you can see on it is how the infill works. So how the inside of the model isn't just empty. It has some support structure on the inside, which holds up the top layers.
Yeah, and not every print is solid. A lot of people think that a 3D print is completely solid, and that's where they get their strength from. Most of the time, a 3D model is nothing more than basically a shell which is being modeled, with a lot of faces, a lot of polygons meshed together. But there is nothing on the inside. As soon as you turn the model inside out, usually when you try and print it, it doesn't do anything because it doesn't see any 3D model anymore. Because it only sees negative faces, and a negative face doesn't have to be used. There are exceptions, but that's the biggest rule of thumb usually in 3D modeling. There are also some little tokens and keychain hangers going around. Those are printed with 2 colors at once, using a single nozzle. I'll tell more about that later. They were printed on this machine with one of our own developed parts. Further than that, I've also printed a complete computer case for an ATX computer as one of my big successful projects.
How much filament is in there?
Rough estimate, around 3 kilos.
Including the field prints?
Not including the fill prints.
Oh, really?
No, we sweep the filth things under the rug. We don't talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
them.
yeah.
We're going to expose them later on a little bit, but not a lot. These are one of Ben's prints.
Yeah, so this was actually at a pizza party, which was at Rap World, where this is Kenny's print, these are mine, and this is Dimitri's. We were the top 3 of that month. So these are some Egyptian styled chess pieces. These are the knights.
My print is a airsoft chronograph, which is basically used to measure the speed of the airsoft BBs being shot and knowing how fast your weapon is firing to make sure it's safe on the field and not injure other players, just tagging them. And so, seeing as Dimitri's not here yet, we'll talk about his print. He printed a little vase. It wasn't that big or special on the model itself, but what he did after, he took the code that he usually goes straight into a printer, and he ran it through a little extra program, and he overlaid an image by varying the velocity of the nozzle at some points. It actually stretches out little parts of the print and actually embosses the print in the object. And this can be done with any print. As soon as you have a default code, you can run it through that program. The program is called Velocity Painter. So if you people want to try it out, if you have a 3D printer, it's called Velocity Painter.
And you had a flower, right?
Yeah, it was a flower that was embedded. We have another Queen fan in the audience. Hey! Designing this logo took me about 3 months, tracing it, making sure everything was printable. It took a lot of time, but I'm very proud of it. The moment I posted it on Thingiverse, someone, not even a day later, asked me, "Can you do the Innuendo album as well?" I haven't responded to that yet because I don't know if I'm going to want to take another 3 months chunk out of my life with that. I am really happy with this though. The model itself has been printed with on a black big disc, and on top of that I switched the filament and went into a gold. So it gives a nice big contrast, and I can use it as a record player dust cover.
This is a bongo I made. This is like this size, and even the skin was actually printed. So there's a 2-layer skin on top of white filament, and from there it went into brown, and it actually worked. Unfortunately, the skin has been torn because
people thought they were allowed to play on it with drumsticks and not just their hands, so
yeah,
they ripped through the skin.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It happens. We've also got we are also proficient in lithophanes. It's basically taking some pictures, converting them into thickened areas on a 3D printed slab, and by putting some light behind it, it actually gives a sort of sepia tone image that comes right through, and depending on how thick it is, it lets through less light, and the thinner it is, the more light comes through. Well, as some of you may recognize, this is actually at the Hacker Hotel. My room's a bit messy to actually photograph the Falcon and not showing every little piece of mess around. So, for the people at home, this is also the entire rocket. It's not mine, it's printed by a guy named Ants in Africa on Thingiverse.
Designed by a guy.
Designed by a guy on Thingiverse named Ants in Africa. The original model is about 1 meter high, and well, that's fun, but it's not as fun as a 2 meter high one. I had a lot of filament left. I just went with a complete 2 meter high one.
It is 2 times as fun, in fact.
Yep. And it's not completely glued together or anything. The grid fins actually do actuate, just to have a little bit of realism. And there is even a second stage in there, complete with vacuum engine.
How many different pieces are in the body? In just the body?
In just the body, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 major parts, and then separate parts for the landing legs, for the grid fins, stuff like that.
The engines.
A quick total comes to around 40. Just for fun, let's say 42.
This was a print I made for a friend of mine. He for his birthday. He's a Pokemon fan, so a Lucario, and his girlfriend at the time actually painted it. It was originally it was red, which you can't see anymore. It's just completely coated in paint. It looks perfect, and 3D prints can actually take paint very well. It sticks on it and stays stuck. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that actually do that, not just printing something and then using it, but they also usually print out little tiny figurines for Dungeons and Dragons, for Warhammer, Star Wars. There's a lot of options for that. A lot of people also actually paint those as well. One of the people that actually does paint sometimes on the 3D printed parts. I know of one person, it's Michel. If you have some questions, you can ask him later after our talk. And well, from here we wanted to introduce Dimitri. The eindbaas. At some point at some point I wanted to get some upgrades for my airsoft rifle, but I wanted to get a new rail. This is basically the front part of the gun. That's this part. Excuse me for a little bit blurry picture, but it's this part and a little printed suppressor. And it worked out really great, and it saved me around €100 just by printing it myself and not ordering one from a airsoft retailer. And there's a lot of ways you can save by doing designs like that.
Have you printed a gun before?
Only parts for it.
Okay.
Actual guns I'm not going to print. It's not feasible. They wouldn't be actually completely usable. It's just.
It was in the news in America. They did a gun that could actually fire 80 bullets.
A bullet and then explodes.
Of course.
It's workable without necessarily being feasible or practical. That's
So it's a suicide gun, and you take one in the process.
Well, moving on to things we sweep under the rug. I 3D printed a bass guitar body. I wanted to have a guitar that was my own, designed my own, and I would love to have some LEDs and everything on the inside. As you can see, it actually looks fairly cool. The only problem was, as soon as I've started tensioning it and tuning it, I could tune one string and then it pulled over like a bowstring. So it was completely unplayable.
I've tried it. It didn't sound good.
No.
It sounded like a detuned bass.
On one string and about 1 or 2 frets, and
Yeah.
that was about it. Otherwise, you'd have to go like half a meter down and pressing it.
So it's doo-doo, and then nothing.
Yeah. There are maybe some cheap songs that are good with that, but
What you maybe could do is make some for the one you regularly bought that is actually playable. Just print some parts and then do the painting again. You can just stick them on.
that
Yeah.
would also be an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also thought about reinforcing the body with steel bars. Just steel bars going through some holes in the main body.
Yeah. And there's also another way. I was thinking about changing this in the next version, because the next version is already on the way. This one has been printed laying down, so the entire guitar parts were flat. And that layers all the plastic in one specific layer, in one specific direction. But the parts aren't strongest in their layer direction, but actually across the layers. So what I'm probably going to do next time is print the guitar on its side in its parts, and then indeed putting another steel rod through it, and that should help me basically have a playable 3D printed bass.
This is
And there's,
another way of non-successful prints.
Enter Dimitri.
Hey, Dimitri. Hi. So, this is another like failed print. We call this spaghetti. I mean, it speaks for itself. It's one of these plates, which during print didn't stick to the bed as good as it was intended, so it fell over. But since it just keeps printing, it's just you get spaghetti.
Yeah. It's printing arms weak, filament spaghetti. There are of course a lot of other failures we've had. I've had at some point had the entire hot end break off, embed itself into a part, and keep printing for about 6 hours. So I've had to reprint half my printer just to make it workable again. And there's a lot of ways you can prevent that. There's a lot of ways, well, you can't, and it just happens because if there is a knot in the spool or things just don't work out right. Before we move on to our future, Dimitri, if you'd come here. There were a couple slides back where you were holding a gun.
I was holding a gun.
Yeah.
At Red Wrap World with my printed reel. We just wanted to say thank you for this.
For Hacker Hotel.
For Hacker
Thank
Hotel
you
and
for-
this awesome weekend. We actually have something for you.
It is a 3D printed shirt.
It says Eindbaas Modderman.
That's cool.
And on the back, we have the Hacker Hotel logo.
Seriously.
Everything is 3D printed. Here you go. Your
One's shirt size, right? So we hope it fits.
your girlfriend was in on this. She brought the shirt.
Yep.
Can trust nobody.
Hey, it fits.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome.
Well, that's awesome.
So
Doing a little 3D printed shirt.
there's another one here, and this is a different type of 3D printed shirt. These are all 3D printed parts,
Yep.
which are printed a few layers, like 1 or 2, then a layer of porous fabric, like tulle or organza, and then resume the print. Because the fabric is so porous, the plastic that gets put on top of the tulle actually just melts to the bottom layers that were already there. And from that point, you just print a bunch of parts and sew them to a t-shirt. And you got something that looks really nice.
Yeah. And because there's space in between the actual prints and it's on that fabric, it's actually articulated. So everything can move, everything basically flows with the body. This was a proof of concept that we wanted to try. In a couple months, maybe a bit later, maybe a bit shorter, we're going to try and print a complete arm of body armor first, and then if that works, we're going to actually go for a full body suit. But we're talking about future plans. We basically also in our road coming here, I've started on a cheap Chinese printer. I spent 200 euros getting it from eBay. Had to pay import tax at the last moment, having it delivered, putting it together in a couple nights, learning how a 3D printer works, how to set certain things, running into a lot of errors because sometimes you just don't have the accuracy needed to actually get some good parts.
As for me, it's a little different.
Yep.
Because you started on a Cartesian device. I started on a Delta in my internship under the supervision of Bart. So
Hi, Bart.
I learned a lot from Bart and from Russell. And I started on Delta machines, such as the Delta right there.
Yep.
And I built my 3D printer from scratch and from ideas that we saw around the shop. We started designing new parts for it and kept expanding on it. And from there, my first printer was born as the prototype that became this beast.
We've designed it with 3 people, with Ben, myself, and Steve Witte, who is at home right now. Well, if he's watching, hi, Steve. We're basically trying to bring good printers at an open source platform so everybody can contribute into what we're doing. If someone has a better idea how to do something and it's viable to put it in the design, let us know. We're going to work on it. And we basically want to have a low-level intermediary printer for intermediary knowledge of 3D printing, but with a lot of features and easy to use handling. As a little fun note, we've basically named all of our printers gem names.
So,
the very
yeah.
first one was Ruby.
The first inspired was Ruby, which was Steve's first printer that he built with plywood. And it was also a Delta, but it was held together with plywood and steel bars. It's called
Plywood,
Ruby.
I think was provided by Dimitri.
Yep.
That is
It was
right.
laser cut by Dimitri. So
Then Ben built
then,
his first
yeah,
printer.
my printer was called Sapphire.
At that point,
and-
I built my first printer, which was at least my first Delta printer. We've dubbed that one Azurite because it was blue and white. And later words, Ben assembled his printer,
Which is called Emerald, which is green and black.
and then we have this printer, which is called Almondine, and it's mostly found in black and red.
So the color of the printer is actually correlates with the gem that it's named after.
That's for fun. I mean, it's still just a printer. If somebody doesn't want to name it, they can do that, of course.
Yeah, of course.
We've also know one printer which is called Bitch and Betty.
Yep.
And well, as the name suggests, print don't always turn out like they should be. We're wanting to start a little company, not an actual company, just well.
It was not meant for profit, but I mean, we made these printers, we designed these, and we're willing to sell them. So if people want them, we can provide you.
And the designs are going to be open source in a while. So for the people that want to print them and already have their own printer, you could download the files and make your own printer.
One thing you can actually buy are these extruders on the back. These extruders are actually also designed by us. It's called a Gemstruder, and yeah, we like them. I mean, they're on the gem stock,
Yeah.
and they are also all ready for purchase at Rap World. We're not sponsored by anything, but
But the most important thing for us during the 3D printing, our road trip on 3D printing is to have fun during the printing. There's a lot of failure. There's a lot of new and challenging things during printing, but at some point, everybody is going to hit a snag or something that they didn't foresee. A printer that basically self-destroyed itself because the head came loose, a fan failing, parts tipping over. You're going for an end goal. Have
what
fun.
is a hobby without fun?
Yeah.
Right.
That's basically what we're going for.
Yep. And in the future, you can find us at gemstock3d.com. So if you log on now, you will see that. So yeah, we're working on it, and it's becoming a thing.
So this is basically our talk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
if you have any questions,
listening.
come up to us. We'll answer them as best as we can. And Michel also has brought his printed Bastion. He's made a replica from the game Overwatch. He actually made it drivable with an RC controller. So he's... This box, yeah.
Are there any people that have questions for these two gentlemen here? Yes, I will do it with this mic because we are recharging the batteries of the throw box.
I see on almost all 3D printers, I see the cooling fans on the hot end.
Yeah.
But what's the purpose of that part?
To actually directly cool the plastic the moment it leaves the nozzle. So that way there is less support needed during the print, and you have better detail because as soon as you well, if you start putting down a gel line with, I don't know, with any type of big thick gel, as soon as it comes out of that nozzle or whatever you squeeze it out of, it starts running out until at some point it's reached its end viscosity. And that's the same with 3D printing. The moment it leaves, it's still hot, it wants to run out, and then as soon as you cool it, it sets in place. So as soon as it leaves the nozzle, for example, it's about this big, and then it wants to run out. But if you cool it directly, it either doesn't or doesn't have as much run out, and then your detail is also a lot higher.
So you want to cool it as fast as possible.
Yep. And some people have, instead of fans, they have complete air compressor setups and everything like that, but then they might as well print in a complete freezer or stuff like that. Yeah. Is there
The
any?
deltas are known for their print speeds, fast movement.
Yep.
What print speeds are you getting out of this printer?
We're getting nominal print speed out of of about 100 millimeters a second. And at that point, we're slightly starting to lose resolution, but we're looking into ways of upgrading that. Right now, this is a 12-volt printer. There is a 24-volt upgrade coming, and we're going to make sure that basically the stepper motors have extra power and everything to counter weird movements and basically keep printing.
To put that a little bit into perspective, a label printer, a simple, small little label printer, it prints at roughly 150 millimeters a second. So a 2D printer is just a little bit faster than this 3D printer. So we're working on it to make it even faster.
Awesome. Other questions?
Are you able to give us a small movement demonstration without printing?
We'll be able to do that in a couple seconds.
Yep.
We'll find a power outlet and start the printer up.
Great.
Any other questions? And if there are any questions that you don't want to ask now in front of a mic, you can always come up to us after the talk.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Interesting talk.
Thank you.